You argue that that constitutes an appropriation, which would violate the power of the purse that's invested in the Constitution, by the Constitution, to the Congress.
Yeah, so this is a bit of a complicated argument, but yeah, so the Constitution gives Congress the power to appropriate money. So normally only Congress can pass a law, which is called an appropriation bill, that gives the executive agencies the ability to spend money. And that's in Article 1 of the Constitution. And there have been occasions in the past where the president would attempt to spend money, and Congress would say, no, wait a minute, you can't spend this money because we didn't appropriate it. There was a big case back in 2015 under the Affordable Care Act, where the Obama administration tried to spend money that Congress didn't appropriate. And one of the federal district courts basically ruled in Congress's favor, saying, no, the administration didn't have the authority. And so in this case, you have a similar situation where the government, the Department of Education and the president are proposing to essentially write off student loans, or in the case of the income contingent loan, they're going to provide more favorable terms that are going to allow fewer students to actually have to repay their loan, or say it the other way, they're going to allow more students to not repay their loans. And the Justice Department is basically saying, well, look, we're not spending money. We're simply not collecting money that the students would have otherwise paid us. And so they're saying, well, there's a distinction here. You know, Congress can appropriate money, but we're not spending money. We're simply not collecting money that's owed to the government. The problem with that argument is they're ignoring the Federal Credit Reform Act, which Congress passed, several decades ago. And under the terms of the Federal Credit Reform Act, student loans are not treated as a loan and a repayment of a loan, which is how you would normally think of it. The government loans money and then people pay it back, and those are two separate transactions. While that is technically true as a matter of finance and cash flow, it's not true as a matter of law. Congress has redefined what that credit transaction is, and instead of counting the cash flow of money in, money out, the way the budget now works is those are calculated on a net present value, which means you say, what is the amount that's lent, that's being loaned by the government, and what is the expected repayment? And you compute a present value and you come up with a number. And if people repay more of their loan, then the government on a present value basis makes money. And if people repay less than the value of their loan, the government has a cost. Well, that cost triggers an appropriation under the current law. And because it's treated as a net amount, which is defined as a cost, and that cost triggers an appropriation, the administration is basically saying, well, ignore the Federal Credit Reform Act and pretend that that doesn't exist. And actually, interestingly enough, in their legal brief, they never mention the Federal Credit Reform Act. So it's not clear the people at the Justice Department had the Office of Management and Budget review their legal brief. And in fact, I'd be surprised they did. And if they did, my guess is they ignored the advice of OMB, because I just find it hard to believe that OMB would have let that brief go out without at least trying to make some plausible argument as to why this complied with the terms of the Federal Credit Reform Act. But in my opinion, it doesn't comply. And therefore, what the administration is proposing to do will be considered an appropriation, and therefore they are exceeding their authority.